Good morning, everyone. Christy Villanueva here with the West San Antonio Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Friday morning. I am here with our Mayor, Ron Nirenberg. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you, Christy.
Thank you. And so we had a really great conversation in December.
It didn't end.
I know. It didn't end, and we had everyone on the edge of their seats at the zoo. They loved it. They felt like we were really getting into some good questions. Yeah. And so that's why we decided to continue this conversation. So I am so happy that you took time out of your day to do this.
Thank you. Thanks for coming over here. We're actually in the Plaza de Armas building in Fratello. So
yes.
Short walk.
So that was good. We're happy to come to you. And as we sit here, we have all this construction going on at City Hall. All these people that are coming through here. We see tourists. So it's a wonderful place to be.
Things are happening in San Antonio, not just in the urban core, everywhere, but this is sort of an epicenter of activity, very deliberately so.
Yes.
Very proud of what's going on. 2020 is going to be a great year.
Fantastic. I am looking forward to so much.
Yeah.
And I know there's so many changes. I wanted to give you a chance. I know we have several questions here, and just so our audience knows, normally these are questions that I come up with as part of things that are submitted by the membership and even by just friends of the chamber, non-members, and our neighborhood partners, like the Historic West Side or the WDC and folks on the East Side that are friends of the West Chamber. But we've had a lot of activities, so do you think you can give us just a little brief overview of what's been in the news regarding you're over at SAWS being very busy?
Oh, yeah. Well, so for the last few months, there's been a lot happening in San Antonio. I think since we last talked, we had a huge economic development series of wins. The Economic Development Foundation's been in the news quite a lot for Team San Antonio. We had great news on the modernization of the Toyota manufacturing facility, which included some new partners in the supply chain.
Yes.
And just, last week, we got news that part of their global realignment will include San Antonio becoming the only large body-on-frame vehicle manufacturer in the entire world, which means their two growth segments, the Tundra and the Sequoia, are going to be solely produced here in San Antonio. That's wonderful.
Yes.
We also, I don't know if it happened after or slightly before we talked, but we launched the Alamo Promise program, which is going to enable Bexar County High School students, graduates from Bexar County High Schools, all of them to access post-secondary education at the best community college district in the nation.
Yes.
We've ratified our climate action adaptation plan. We're in year 2 of our housing strategy, which will include our city's first ever chief housing officer. And I'm looking forward to doing what the city has talked about for a generation and really not gotten to the finish line, which is to finally reform our transportation system and end our historic underinvestment in transportation, to get people out of congestion, to disrupt poverty, to ensure that we're economically viable for the future.
Absolutely. And all those parts and pieces are coming together with the support of our residents, our neighbors. And a lot of folks know that, I'm one of those supporters. I'm a big fan of transit-oriented development. As I've traveled around and learned different things from folks in Canada and folks in Boston and all over. Having a transit station right next to affordable housing and these mixed-use buildings really helps to support a family.
Yeah, and transportation is one of the key pillars of a family's cost of living. And so when there's not options, when we're lacking options as a community, when there's not an adequate, efficient public transportation system along with the other modes of transportation, then we're losing out on our ability to ensure a long-term sustainable cost of living. And so when you talk about transit-oriented development, I love that, because one of the other conversations we're having in this community is about how we can build inclusive economic development. So the transit-oriented development that we see in major cities that have robust transportation networks is not only great for the overall economy, but it's also ensuring that everyone gets to benefit from that.
Right, right. Now, I know that there's a lot of concerns. I know from our membership and our neighbors, they say, you know, you can't take that money away from the aquifer. And I love the folks that dedicate their time at the aquifer along with their staff. And they don't seem to have a good concept of, first of all, that was going to expire, that whole plan. And we needed to do something with it. And it did used to belong in the transit arena way back when.
The state legislature authorized municipalities like ours to have 1 cent of sales tax go towards building municipal transportation systems. 40 years ago, we opted to use only half a cent. We've since used the other half for other purposes, which have been valuable for this community.
Very advantageous.
But we have been historically underfunded, which has resulted in what we've seen, a mode of transportation that is simply bursting at the seams, and we've reached a point of no return. So I love this conversation because it's about correcting a lot of misinformation that's out there. The conversation about, well, you're taking money away from the aquifer and putting it towards transportation is totally disingenuous. We're not. In fact, I find it slightly ironic because I've been the water guy. I've been the aquifer advocate in City Hall. And so I know the Aquifer Protection Program. I know how valuable it is. I also know how it needs to be continuing in the future. And so what we're doing is what we have done is created a path forward for us to continue the Aquifer Protection Program, finally build our modern multimodal transportation system that we know is a requirement for the city, and continue our creekway system, which is also a portion at 1/8 cent, as part of our transportation system. And we can do it without raising taxes and without raising rates. And so that's the path we've developed, and it accomplishes all of our community goals. And so, but it does mean that we have to be willing to give up status quo. And I will tell you, there's not a soul I've talked to in the last 7 years as I've knocked on, seems like every door in this community, who said, we want you to continue status quo. They know things need to change. We need to have clean water. That's what the Aquifer Protection Program can do with the path that we've laid out. We need to have a transportation system that's equitable, that's efficient, that's sustainable, that keeps us economically viable. That's what this plan is all about, Connect SA with VIA 2040. And then we also need to have all of the great popular recreational and mobility elements that we've enjoyed as a community. The Linear Creekway, Greenway Trail system is one, and actually in this plan, we complete it and we go even further into the development of the Greenway Trail. So this is a win-win-win across the board, but it is requiring people to work collectively rather than for their own self-interest.
This is definitely a plan of unity, which is why I've gotten behind it, and the West Chamber has taken the initiative to step forward and get behind it along with our board of directors. And for a lot of people, I think, you know, sometimes they have a hard time breaking this down in their head, and we remind when our business owners say, well, but all that is great, but it's going to cost me, the business owner, or especially the small business owner. We hear that, and then we hear the conversations of the large business owner, the Valeros of the world.
How is it possible you can do that without raising rates and taxes? It's not possible. It's about trust. I totally agree. But let's break each element down. We can do that. On the public transportation side, the 1/8 cent leverages all of the entire 2040 system, including the infrastructure and ART, mass transit, for the first time in San Antonio. What we have to do is have that operational revenue that allows us to go and now start getting the federal grants that help us build the infrastructure. In addition to that, we align all of our transportation spending that we're already doing in the city. And as you might remember, in 2017 when I became mayor, we tripled the amount of the proportion of our city budget that goes into basic infrastructure. We spend $110 million a year on basic transportation infrastructure, and so we're going to align those priorities to help us coordinate the system. On the Greenway Trail side, part of the transportation network is this Greenway Trail system.
Yes.
And it will become a capital priority for the city of San Antonio to complete it. And we also know that there's some alignment with the county. So there's some discussions about what can we do together.
Yes.
And then finally on the aquifer piece, how do you do that? Well, the San Antonio water system started this program, actually through legislation created by then state legislator Robert Puente.
Yes.
They have been at the table the entire time because they were the original purchasers of the easements for the Aquifer Protection Program. We're working with them to bring them to the table so that this becomes not a cash-based program, whereas as sales tax comes in, we're spending money to buy land way out there.
Right.
But instead, we make it a capital priority so that we treat it just like any other major capital improvement priority, and we're able to amortize those purchases. So the annual costs are part of our annual budget.
Right.
It doesn't require any rate adjustment.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, we can do that because 4% of annual SAWS revenues go to the city of San Antonio, into the general fund. If this is a priority for our community, we can make it part of that general fund.
Absolutely. And I feel really confident, especially now. I'm very happy that Eric Walsh is in there and looking at the numbers and really empowering the assistant city managers to work on this and really think outside of their proverbial box.
Yep.
It's amazing. I mean, this is, for any business, we rework our budget to make sure we got more vehicles, to supply more things for our staff, to do that. This is the same thing, just on a much larger scale. And to see the unity that we've been trying to work towards for many, many years, and to break down those barriers for that individual neighbor is extremely helpful. And on Tuesday night, as I was sitting in my VIA board meeting, Lyle Larson, Representative Lyle Larson, sent out a message on Facebook. And
We've been talking.
That's very disturbing. And I did respond, just on a personal level, because first of all, he had a photo of a school bus in that, and second of all, he says that all our VIA buses are empty, and that's why I sent a message, and I've had my staff reach out to him and say, join us. Join us for those nurses, for those professional people
working families.
Yes, working families that are craft workers. There's a lot of construction workers and other skilled labor that are taking the bus at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning. So no, at 10:30 in the morning, they are not on the bus because they're working.
Yeah.
But also the hospitality folks. You can go to almost any hotel here and you will find a patron of VIA.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk about an article that came out that showed aggregate ridership down on VIA, and that was true where there's not frequency adjustments. And
Exactly.
so, I will be first to agree with people to say, if you have the choice, if you're going to be stuck in endless congestion, the last place you probably want to be is in a bus.
Right.
If you're stuck in constant congestion. But that's the point, is that having a modern, multimodal, comprehensive transportation system gets people out of congestion, gives people choice. And for those who don't have a choice, where we've actually already increased frequency, we've actually increased ridership.
Yes.
The
Immediately.
Yeah, so
it's increased.
That's where you have to read more than just the headline.
Yes.
Ridership has actually increased for people, working families, with strategic investments in increasing frequency. So the great part about this plan is that it's increasing frequency and reliability for everyone, which means that if you have the choice, more than likely you'll be making a choice about a vehicle that's going to be less likely to be in congestion. But if you don't have the choice, you're also not going to be stuck in front of people who are driving in their cars.
That's right.
So back to Lyle. He and I have actually worked together on water issues.
Okay.
And so we have a good professional working relationship. I reached out to him and we're talking with him. But a lot of what has been discussed is based on lack of or flat out misinformation. This is not sacrificing aquifer protection. In fact, the plan is to continue aquifer protection and not let it expire, which it does if we keep status quo. The sales tax expires. So the plan we've laid out, it rejects the idea that this has to be an either-or choice between transportation and aquifer protection. But I would ask anyone who is scared of changing status quo to think about what happens when we don't, right? Think about what happens if we choose to once again not do anything about our transportation system.
Right.
We know the answer to the question. Traffic congestion, average commute times are up 75% over the next 2 decades. The average wait time at these major bottlenecks, which are occurring now all throughout our system, is up 900%, will be up 900%.
Yes.
We know that emissions, we're already in non-attainment, and the goals that we've set out for sustainability and climate action, we will not achieve because half of the strategy involves reforming our transportation system. We know that a city that has, we know that the best and most important disruptor to poverty is adequate public transportation. So we are simply saying, you know, that 22% level that everyone was very concerned about talking about, we've chosen not to do anything about. So I ask you, if you are only willing to use status quo, think about the consequences of that decision. A decision not to act is a decision to condemn the city to the things that we don't want to see.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And changing our transit system, upgrading it, because since we have been underfunded for so long, this allows for those veterans to be able to get wherever they want to go, for the elderly to jump on the bus and have that freedom of mobility that they've always wanted. We don't necessarily want them driving, you know, so they get to take the bus, and there's groups of folks, and I've had, not via fellow board members, but other folks say, well, you know, it's people on the bus are a little seedy. There's no seedy people. I mean, you know, we've got all sorts of people, but that's what makes San Antonio so amazing. And we have to remember, we actually have an award-winning transit police department here in San Antonio. And the actual name of the award escapes me, but they have to go through some very stringent measures in order, and they are one of the only transit police department in Texas that has this designation. It is fantastic. They are everywhere. They're in plain clothes. They take care of us.
So there's a tremendous complexity of the operation that has to be supported and has to be grown.
Yes.
But, you know, people also should understand that maybe they're not going to choose to ride the bus. This plan is not just about buses. VIA doesn't do just buses anymore. In fact, this plan brings us our first ever mass transit plan to San Antonio. And imagine taking a mass transit vehicle when you get off of your flight in the airport and straight into downtown.
Yes.
Or from the west side of town all the way to the east side of town, an express rapid transit vehicle that doesn't stop and doesn't ride in normal flow of traffic. It's on its own dedicated lane. Imagine getting picked up with an app at your house and dropped off in your direct destination. On-demand options.
Yes.
We're actually y'all are already doing that.
We were doing it. Via Link does that.
We moved that all throughout the city under this plan.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many different elements, traffic sync, smart signaling, all kinds of stuff that happens if we simply choice that we're going to act on the goals that we've had for so long.
Yes, and it does nothing but help our city, help our businesses thrive. The other missing component is van pool. So let's say construction, like this, construction's going on, you have 100 to 200 workers on a site at any given time. Well, when you have them meet at the office and then everybody gets in a van of 16 people, then we ship them all over here. Now we open up more spots, more parking spots for those of us who have to come in and out. And they are transported safely and on time every single day. That means this job gets done on time because workers show up. People show up to work and stay at work. Now for me, I know people always ask me if I take the bus, and I tell them yes. There's a lot of days that I can't, but I've made a commitment to at least ride the bus 1 to 2 times a week.
And every time you do, you're not stuck in front of the person in traffic that
That's
is
right.
tired of congestion.
That's right. And
Imagine.
I get to have a conversation.
Yeah.
I get to talk to my 15-year-old, as we're sitting there along our route. I get to talk to my other family members or friends. We get to go to events and relax. Now, how many times can we say that in our busy day?
Right.
It's amazing. And the fact that it's affordable just makes sense. And there's a lot of folks out there suffering without transportation, and they can't plan their day around this because it's a 60-minute wait. But with this plan, now we're going from 60 minutes to 12 minutes to, or less. And it's amazing. I mean, It really gives the power back to the people and that mobility. So that's what we're hoping for. And we're going to continue to work this way. And I think this is a good segue into the other thing that I wanted to ask you. Some of our residents say, we don't push development on the west side and the east side enough. These are places that there's a perceived barrier from our neighbors that hasn't been addressed. And while I work on the west side, I'm an east side resident, I have seen some developments on the east side. It is not a conversation that's flowing constantly. We're not telling people from the outside that are trying to relocate about these 2 gems that are here.
Yeah.
And this is where there's bus service already, for those call centers or whatever. Is there anything that's either in the works or that we can do that the general public can help support to help develop these 2 areas?
So I think that was true when we started this decade, and it's transformed pretty dramatically. In fact, one thing that we're having to adjust for and is rapid gentrification. And so we've actually seen the east side of San Antonio become one of the most rapidly gentrifying in the entire country.
Yes.
And so we've put together programs to make sure that kind of revitalization and development doesn't adversely impact residents who've been there for a long time, our risk mitigation strategy and our overall housing framework. So the development is coming. I think some of the things that we're doing is we've reshaped, we've reformed our economic development strategy to be an inclusive economic development strategy. So we're actually encouraging growth of employment and retail and things like that in the west and east sides of San Antonio. You've seen things like Velocity, Texas crop up, which are huge employment centers.
Yes.
But we're also encouraging the infrastructure. I mentioned 2017 where we lifted up our overall priority of transportation infrastructure. The other part that happened in 2017 is we started budgeting based on equity. So the east side and the west side were the major recipients of that. They have been, those 2 areas in particular have been left behind of our overall infrastructure development because everything has been divided up equally. And when we know you start way behind, you divide things up equally, you never catch up.
Right.
So we've started budgeting more for infrastructure and the basics of services on the east side and west side of town. You're starting to see that construction.
Yes.
Doesn't change overnight, but you're starting to see it happen.
Right.
The other major development is the great innovation that's happening within our public school districts. Believe it or not, despite a lot of the consternation that's been around, the school districts over the last several years, great stuff's happening. SAISD in particular has become, a growth district, and so I think that is starting to fuel more development. As we know, schools are a major driver of growth and development where people live.
Yes.
And so it's beginning to happen, and I think you're gonna see more of this as we strategically develop our transportation network, and that's where I say, in particular, phase 1 of the first ever mass transit system in the city of San Antonio is going to be a major east-west route, which will encourage that kind of inclusive transit-oriented development.
Absolutely. And as we talk about this, you mentioned Toyota at the beginning, and then we're talking about this economic development piece. All this helps support medium and small businesses and the people that they employ. We have to keep that in perspective.
97% of all employer firms are small businesses.
Mm-hmm. I am also a small business owner with my husband, so I get it. I understand how important it is to educate our staff and make sure that they understand what's going on in the city, keep them focused and going. And these are not fees that the city is just kind of coming up with and passing on to our businesses. We're not doing that. No one's doing that. But we have to get educated. Well, we have already come to the end. We always seem to run out of time. There's so many more questions.
More episodes.
We might just have to have more episodes and visit our small business owners while we do it. So we'll figure that out as the year goes on. I really appreciate it, your time. And I know if anyone wants to find more information, they can find it on the city website.
City website, and if I can also plug our own website.
Sure.
We launched a pretty innovative new website called askron.org.
Oh, man.
And it's kind of a compilation of all the different channels of communication. You can reach me.
Yes.
And we'll have a lot of interactive Q&A there. And I do want to say one thing, Christy. Under your leadership, the West Chamber has been a bold driving force of the city. I've really appreciated the vision that you as a community of business leaders have taken, and really taking important stands for the future of the city. I think it's admirable, and that is the kind of business leadership that I think people have desperately wanted to see.
Yes, we all need to come together. It's about unity and education, and we can all do it together. So thank you again. So everyone, don't forget, many people think that I speak a little too frankly, but hey, it's the only way. Directness is the best. So stop complaining and get involved. And I'm telling you, I'm talking to you, everybody out there, whether you make a very small salary or you make a 7-figure salary, you need to stop complaining and come and get involved in one or more of the groups to support our city, to support the workforce. Remember, you're not going to have a great bottom line if you don't support those people who are right outside your door supporting you to make you money. So we've got to get this on the road and cleaned up. And I'm always open for, any conversations or criticism or what have you. I'm here. I don't hide. So come and visit the West San Antonio Chamber. We hope to see you next time. We've got another pop-up scheduled in the next week. We've got a golf tournament, and we've also got, I don't know if you've heard, International Women's Day on March 6th. All 6 councilwomen are going to join us, and so we're very honored. We'll have a few business women. We're going to have some very honest conversations about, sometimes what it takes to be a part of a family and a leader in the community, and what we're doing for our kids for the future. So thank you so much. You can find all that information on westsachamber.org or give us a call, 210-229-1266. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks.